die. 17 more, that'll get more. Cygnar. That's it. Everybody.
Hello and welcome back. Steve here from the Mighty Die. Been away for like a month or something. Ages. Just haven't been getting any games in, just the way things have worked out recently. But we're back. We got another tournament battle report. So this is a tournament that I went to at the weekend. And yeah, it was a really nice tournament. It was 20 players. This is what the distribution of armies looked like. As you can see, it was mainly... Well, there was a lot of Cygnar players, including myself, and quite a few Menoth. And then Cygnar wasn't represented as strongly as you might usually expect here. And we got a couple of Crix players and Scorn, and then the rest are just one-offs of Mercenaries, Syra, Aurus, and Trollbloods. So, obviously I'm a Cygnar player, and had to prepare myself to go up against some Cygnar players. Quite a good chance of getting drawn against a Cygnar player. It was 4 rounds, all in one day, so pretty stressful. By the time you get to that 4th game, you're pretty tired, and gets pretty irrelevant who wins at that point, unless you're in the top 3, of course. So here's my 2 armies that I chose to go for. So yeah, knowing that there's a lot of Cygnar players at the tournament, I needed to go for a list that could be played into Cygnar, and for that I decided to go for a Striker 2 list. Now this list is really similar to my Maddox list that I've been playing a lot recently, and really the only thing that is swapped out is the Warcaster and the Battle Group, but apart from that it's more or less exactly the same models in there. Now this Striker 2 list is a list that's very similar to what War Room PL has been playing over on their channel when they play Striker 2, and it's a pretty standard Storm Division list, I think. And actually there was actually 2 other players who had virtually identical lists to this at the tournament itself. And since playing at the tournament, I've seen several battle reports with exactly the same list. So this is obviously a pretty popular list, and obviously a net list, although I just translated it from my Maddox list. So the idea is with the Maddox list that everything gets to hit extra hard for 1 turn, and with this list it's that everything gets to reposition and make an extra attack on the feat turn. So it's really quantity versus quality. But the key thing is that it can play into Cygnar, because Cygnar isn't well known for having huge amounts of armor, and so Storm Blades with power 15 attacks and Storm Lancers with power 15 or 13 attacks can probably deal with a lot of what Cygnar's got to offer. Cygnar Def Skew, the Storm Lancers can deal with, and it's a pretty fast list as well. So the actual list would be Striker 2 with a Squire, and he's got Old Rowdy with him and a Lancer. Obviously he got the Lancer because of Rebuke, need to have an Arc Node, and the Lancer is also an excellent positive charge target, particularly because you don't need to worry about the range of the spell, because it can just cast it on itself. Then Rowdy, because he's a good choice with Striker, makes him a bit harder to assassinate. Got the Journeyman Warcaster with the Firefly as standard, so the Journeyman Warcaster's there to... it's got any number of several targets for Arcane Shield, including Striker himself or the Storm Blades or either of the units of Storm Lancers. And then the Firefly's there. Actually this list has got a lot of electric attacks, but the intention is to go into Cygnar, then the electric attacks aren't that important, so... The Flyer flies mainly there just because it's one of the cheaper Warjacks that you can take with the Journeyman Warcaster. Then we got a full unit of Stormblades with the CA and 2 WAs, weapon attachments, and 2 full units of Storm Lancers and Lattimore in there as well. And so that's in Storm Division, that's 75 points. And then the other list, I decided to go for Nemo 3 again. I think I played Maddox and Nemo 3 in the last tournament, but ended up not playing Nemo 3 at all. But this time I did actually end up playing him, and I decided to steer away from the Storm Lance spam Nemo 3 list and decided to try him out in Heavy Metal. So that means a lot of jacks, and that worked out quite interestingly in the way that the points were worked out in this tournament. Maybe I'll talk about that later if I remember. So it's Nemo 3 with Finch obviously, and a Squire, and and he's got in his battle group he's got the Lancer again because he really likes to have an arc node. He's got that slam spell, he's got his chain lightning spells, all that kind of stuff, all the buffs and everything. It's all nice to have a Lancer there. Then he's also got Dynamo because Dynamo is awesome with Nemo, and with his feet is super nasty. And then rather than trying to go for lots and lots of electric shooting, partly because I don't have the models, I went for a double Centurion and then rounded that out with an Ironclad, which was another heavy just to put in, just to make up the points. And we got the Journeyman Warcaster with the Firefly in there. Firefly obviously helps Dynamo kill some armour, and Nemo as well, and Finch. We've also got Jakes with a Stormclad. Now I quite like to put Thunderhad on Jakes, but just wasn't enough points for that, so we've got the Stormclad on there as well. Instead, the Stormclad is pretty useful with Jakes because if she's got that threat extension, she can power him up fully with focus, and Escort, is it Escort? Sidekick is the def bonus for Stormclad, and Stormclad on def 14 is actually pretty nasty as well. And then finally in there we've got Strange Ways because of all these jacks. It's quite nice to have Strange Ways in there. Also, if you want to play one of the Centurions a bit far away from Finch, then you can pass on focus without Nemo having to give any focus. That puts the Centurion up to 2 focus, which means they can run and put up their no charge spell on themselves without having to be too close to everyone else. So those are the 2 lists. So yeah, like I said, I've got Striker 2 specifically for Cygnar, and Nemo 3 because I wanted to play him, I wanted to try out this list. Now that was a big thing with this tournament, is that I've actually never played either of these lists at all. Although I've got quite a lot of experience with Striker, it's a list that I haven't played with him before, and I have some experience with Nemo as well, but Nemo 3, but again, I've never played him in heavy metal, so it was possibly a little bit risky to go into a tournament with 2 lists that I've never played before, but we'll see how that worked out. So first up, I drew a Menoth list, and this is the first time I've played Menoth, so that was quite interesting in itself. And there was a choice. He had either Resnick, the Battle Engine Resnick, I can't remember whether that's 2 or 3, and Thyro 1. And so I actually didn't know what would be best to drop into either of these lists at the time. So I decided just to drop Nemo, and knowing that I would then that would unlock me from having to drop Nemo later if all of my other matchups turned out to be striker matchups. So I just went for Nemo, and in the end he decided to go for Thyra. Here's the list. So it's Thyra 1, Blood of Martyrs, Crusader, Devout, and the Revenger, which are all jacks as far as I know. Choir, of course, 2 units of Daughters of the Flame, 2 units of Flamebringers, full units, and Nissia, which I believe is the Daughter of the Flame solo, and a Vassal of Menoth, and a 1 Rack. And looks like that was also in theme, although I can't remember what the theme actually does. It looks like it gives you some free stuff. And that's called Guardians of the Temple. So yeah, I've never played against Menoth before, so I had very little experience. Also, a caveat, I was pretty bad at taking photos again during this tournament, so there might be some setups missing, there might be some finishing moves missing, but I will try to include as much commentary as I can. But obviously I want to try and keep the bat rep for the whole tournament down to less than about half an hour, so I will try and summarise the games a little bit, but hopefully the missing photos won't disturb too much. So it looks like my opponent got the first turn, and we had a little chat while we were talking about what our strategies were. And so the main thing here was that he's got these Daughters of the Flame and the Cavalry Daughters of the Flame as well, and there's quite a lot of models. It's kind of an infantry spam list, and they're all pretty annoying, so you can give them parry. Some of them got parry natively, Pathfinder, that kind of thing. And although they don't hit very hard, they're very hard to hit themselves. They're all def 14. They're all really fast, and even one unit has got ambush. I think maybe that's from the theme. So you can see on the left of the screen there's his ambush unit, That's not actually brought in, that's just sitting there ready to come in. So knowing all of that, I've deployed pretty centrally. I know that if you're going to get ambushed, then you want to make sure you're a fairly narrow deployment if you're scared of the ambushing models. So I've got Nemo right in the middle. He's definitely going to be taking advantage of that forest that's directly in front of him there. And I've got the Centurions flanking, because I thought it would be nice for them to first of all take advantage of the trench and the hill, but also to make it difficult to charge into the massive guys here. So what my opponent's going to be doing is he's going to be trying to surround me, trying to get all the way around me, and then charging everything in all at the same time. And because of he's got a lot of parry and a lot of attacks, then hopefully he'll be able to get through and take down Nemo. And my objective really is just to be able to try and kill as many of his infantry as I can before he gets to Nemo. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. So it was he did a very spread out deployment, and I did a very small narrow deployment, which was pretty good because I've got so few models. So looking at the next slide, you can see where I moved up. So yeah, there's Nemo parked up behind the forest, so he's blocking line of sight to himself from everyone, and then really just try and bunched up so they can't possibly fit any of the large base models next to Nemo. And yeah, just trying to be a bit defensive really, and waiting for him to come and see what he can do. So in the next slide you can see that he's really got in amongst my models. The flanking unit has come in and they're actually on my side of the table and running up towards his table edge. So they came in on the right, and those dark models down on the right, bottom right hand side near my tape measure, those are the extra Daughters of the Flame. As you can see on the left, his cavalry is swept right in. They're speed 9 cavalry, so they can pretty much go wherever they want. There's other cavalry on the... Did I say on the left? The black cavalry on the left can go as fast as they want. The cavalry on the right, he was a little bit more cautious with. Stuck one in just to tie up and engage some units, some jacks, sorry. And yeah, so really just surrounded me and setting up for an assassination run on Nemo. So Nemo is very, very weedy, very easy to assassinate, and you need to be very careful with him. So really, the question here is, can I take down anyone who's got a threat range on Nemo with all my attacks? So that's what I tried to do, and here's the next slide. So yeah, you can see I did a pretty good job of taking down anyone who happened to be too close to Nemo. So it was a combination of being able to give all of the jacks loads of focus, having some decent shooting with Electro Leaps. The Stormclad had some Electro Leaps, and a nice reach on the Centurions, and Nemo's spell and shooting. And yeah, all in all, I was able to take down an entire unit of Daughters. I was able to bring down the second unit down to just 2 models. I took out a couple of the light coloured cavalry and 3 of the dark coloured cavalry. So yeah, so I was pretty pleased in all that's how much damage I did. So it looked like the attrition was certainly on my side of things, although I had a bit of a problem with regards to scenario in that I couldn't really get any of my models far enough away from Nemo to really affect the scenario, apart from Dynamos out there on the side. So you can see that I really need to basically survive the next assassination attempt, and if I can do that, then I will be fine to win on scenario on attrition, because he doesn't really have enough armor cracking to really deal with all of my jacks. So moving on to the next slide, and you can see that unfortunately for me, he was able to get some of those ponies in to within distance of Nemo with Pathfinder, and being able to ignore line of sight for charging. I think maybe that was something to do with the feet. So virtually the whole army is still standing, but Nemo got assassinated, unfortunately. So yeah, so it was quite an interesting game. And I said immediately if we played it again, then I would have probably parked 4 of my heavies just in a circle around Nemo, knowing that he'd probably be safe in there. The forest was pretty good for Nemo, but unfortunately it just didn't do enough to block those ponies from coming in from the flanks. So the positioning of my bases was really key here. And yeah, so his plan worked, and yeah, it was a good fun game. Yeah, so moving on to the next round. So on the next round I drew against a Cygnar player, the one that I'd played before in a different tournament. Last time he played Butcher 1 with some Men of War and stuff like that. This time he went for the Old Witch. And I drew Nemo 3 again, because I felt like all of those jacks on Nemo probably had enough armor cracking with all the focus that he can give out to deal with quite a lot of Cygnar stuff. So I was pretty unhappy about the Striker 2 list's armor cracking potential. Although with positive charge it does rack it up a little bit. I just felt like probably on attrition, and the Jack list was probably the better one to go for against Cygnar. Yeah, and he drew the Old Witch with Scrapjack and Behemoth. Now that was quite a key relationship between the Old Witch and Behemoth. I'll come back to that in a second. 2 Devastators. Now I'm quite used to you coming up against Devastators, so I know what they do quite well. I know what Behemoth does quite well as well, but I've never been up against the Old Witch. Then he had a unit of Man of War Shock Troopers, and the Officer attachment, and his Man of War Kovnik, and a Grey Lord Turnian, and also a Colden Lord, which I'm not sure what that is, and a Winter Guard Field Gun Crew. So yeah, so pretty heavy armour list, and the key interaction here is what happens between Behemoth and the Old Witch. So I'll just look that up. So yeah, the Old Witch has a spell called Wield Secrets, which is an upkeep, quite a cheap one, only costs 2 points, and I'll read out the rules for it. It's target friendly faction model or unit against Pathfinder and Hunter. And Hunter ignores concealment and cover when making a ranged attack, which was extremely important with Behemoth, because in combination with Arcing Fire, it means that he can, with that spell, he can get a lot better line of sight and a lot more different shots than you'd otherwise be able to with Behemoth. So here you can see setup. Actually, this is just after he started moving his Devastators there, but you can basically see his setup there, Men of War in the middle, Devastators running up the middle, Behemoth's hiding behind that big rock there, and then the weapons crew is over on the right. My setup was really, as I chose, what did I choose? I chose Effigy of Valor as my objective, so I knew I'd be able to hide behind that, and it would provide cover for Nemo, so that was would have been a good spot for me to sit and be protected. And then I was intending to put the 2 Centurions on either side of the objective in base contact, and that would basically create a wall that would be very difficult to remove for my opponent to hide Nemo behind and all the other key solos. And I've also put my Lancer out on the right hand side. I considered that the ruins there, which we actually treated as an obstruction, would be pretty good at hiding the Lancer, maybe be able to flank around and get an assassination off, and then it's really just putting the rest of the models in positions where they will be able to be of some use on the board. Obviously it's that central zone is going to be where all the action happens, so it doesn't make too much sense for me to get too far away from there. So on the next slide, this is after we've both had a turn. So you can see, exactly like I said, I've got those 2 Centurions on either side of the objective, and Nemo is camping out behind. Although, as you can see, he doesn't have any focus camping on him. And what I managed to do, this is actually, I believe this is actually after we've both had 2 turns, because as you can see, my Lancer is way up the board and actually getting in his lines. And this is when I feated and tried to get the Lancer to do some attacks on the Old Witch from behind, but that didn't work out. She was actually pretty hard to hit, and although it was a good idea, I think I chose the wrong spells to try and catch her with. So I think I was doing Chain Lightning when I should have maybe done a Force Hammer to knock her down. Anyway, the key thing here was that he wanted to destroy my objective to give him line of sight to Nemo, and on his second turn, he wasn't able to do that because you can't target the objective until the second player's second turn. And he took the first turn. He moves Scratjack up on the left and one of the Devastators. The other Devastator is sitting in the middle of the zone, obviously intending to camp there and just be difficult to remove. So at this point I don't think there was any much point playing on a scenario, because we're both completely blocking each other's scenarios. We've both got very difficult to remove models sat in the zone. Nemo with Magnetize up on his jacks makes Centurions just ridiculously difficult to do anything about. And yes, because it was feet turn, I opened up on the Men of War with Dynamo, but I completely failed to do anything. I think I injured one of them slightly, but I certainly didn't remove any of the models. So it was a bit of a damp squib feet turn for me. Although I didn't feel too bad. I felt like with the amount of focus and the amount of heavies that I got on the next turn, he wouldn't quite be able to get to me with the Men of War, and he wouldn't want to open up his Devastators just to get a few hits, and only for them to get killed on the next turn. So I didn't feel too bad about the whole situation. And as you can see, moving on, after we both had a couple more turns, actually this is his next turn, I didn't get a chance for another turn, but as you can see, Nemo got assassinated again. So what happened was that he moved his Devastator in and was able to then target the objective because it was his third turn. Took out the objective easily with the Devastator, which made Nemo completely available to see. And all he had to do was then target him with Behemoth and boost to hit, and then that was enough to finish off Nemo. So so this Old Witch Behemoth combination is pretty nasty assassination vector, which obviously I'd never played the Old Witch before, so I didn't really know what I was doing against her. I didn't know that's what was going to happen. And once again, he managed to. The opponent managed to assassinate Nemo 3, but without me really losing any significant number of models off the board. So that's 2 for 2. So still feeling all right because it's early days in the tournament. Still got 2 games to go. It'd be nice to win one of the games in the tournament maybe, but we'll see how it goes. So the next matchup. So next matchup was against Crix, and Striker 2 was my Crix drop. Not too worried about Crix armour, and I think Striker 2's got some strong assassination vectors, and his feet turn should be able to deal with a lot of infantry, and Crix jacks aren't too much of a problem. And also Striker 2's way harder to assassinate. I'd already been assassinated twice in the tournament, so I felt like maybe I should be a little bit more careful, and maybe I should take a caster who's a lot harder to assassinate, which Striker 2 is. I have no idea. I can't remember. Oh, I think it was. I think the pairing was Scar, Pirates Queen Scar, and I believe it was Denegra 1 was the other choice. But he went for Scar, and I went for Striker 2. I actually managed to record the setup for this one. So as you can see. He's got his Kraken there, the Colossal, and that was actually the main thing that caused me concern, because it's got pretty good shooting, so I felt like it might be able to take down my Storm Lancers before they get a chance to do anything. I think it's got an AoE attack as well, so the Storm Blades wouldn't be 100% safe. He's got the Wither Shadow Combine in there, a Machine Wraith, Necrotech, some Statixis Raider Captain, Necrosurgeon and Stitch Thralls, Statixis Gunslingers, Statixis Raiders, Statixis Raider Witch, and Icos, and 2 Stalkers. And actually my opponent was pretty nice right at the beginning of the game. He said that he played against Stalkers before, and I rather arrogantly said, yes, I know what they do. So Stalkers I've played against before in Mark II, and they're very fast and very nasty for assassination. I always thought I'd just be a bit more careful with Striker. I won't give him direct line of sight for charging, and I'll be a long way away and all that kind of stuff. So not too worried about Stalkers. So my opponent specifically said I got 2 Stalkers here, so watch out for them. Maybe that will come into it later in the battle report. And so I set up in a pretty standard formation for striker. Judging by the distances, I reckon I probably got the first turn. I just got striker slap bang in the middle. It's the pit, so all the action's going to happen in the centre there. And there's even a building straight in the centre of the... There's two houses on this table, one of them's 2D, one's 3D. The 2D one's straight in the centre of the central zone there. So I thought this would be ideal for me because I could park striker up, he could be scoring points, and I could be winning on attrition with all my lovely Storm Lancers and Storm Blades. And my main objective then would be to take down the Kraken. And so I was even considering on the second turn running everything up and then using Striker's feet to get some attacks in and hopefully take down most of his army with all the Electro Leaps. So here's my first turn. So as you can see, the Storm Blades with their special advanced move in Storm Division got quite a long way up the board, didn't quite get to the zone. I probably could have got into the zone, but I wanted to park them a little bit further back just to keep out of range of the guns there. Storm Lancers on the right, up behind the building, nice cover, with the Lancer next to them, ready to rebuke the Styxis witches, or whatever they're called, the raiders. It's his main unit, so those are the ones that are going to get rebuked. And the ones on the Storm Lancers on the left just spread out a bit and stayed out of charge range of his models there. Rowdy, again, he's a little bit far back. I still feel like Rowdy's a pretty good model to play quite far forward, but he does like to hang around striker, so yeah. And I put up Deceleration, which is a great spell for striker, because all of the stuff that he likes to bring in Storm Division also all really likes a little armor buff for against shooting. So put Storm Lancers up to armor 19 against shooting, put Storm Blades up to armor 17 against shooting. So those are all nice little buffs to go up to. This is after he's done his first turn and I've done my second turn. So he was fairly cautious moving up. Didn't seem too worried about Electro Leaps, I guess, because the witches or raiders or whatever they're called have got quite high defense. The Kraken just moved up centrally. I don't believe it was able to take any shots at that point. The two Stalkers moved up, again very cautiously. I wasn't too worried about them, and all of the support sort of hanging back there. I think was a little bit worried about me just being able to charge in and just wipe out all of that infantry and all the support. And you can see on the same slide what I did as well. So I've got Striker 2 up behind that building, towing into the zone. He's surrounded by Storm Blades. I believe the Storm Blades have mini-feated this turn, and really just moving the Storm Lancers up into position so that they're a little bit out of range of any charges, but able to charge themselves on the next turn. And I managed to get a rebuke up on the on that unit of Styxis 2. I got Striker camping 1 focus. I didn't feel like he was in any sort of danger where he was, so I didn't feel the need to put Arcane Shield up on him. I think Arcane Shield's up on the left unit of Storm Lancers right there. So, looking at the next slide, and oh dear, that's right, I got assassinated again. So my opponent really took a long time to think about it. I think it took him about 20 minutes the whole turn, and it turned out to be worth it because he found that I had put Striker within 15 inches of one of his Stalkers, and that's apparently all you need to kill a Striker 2. So he did some very good shooting with his Kraken, and managed to take out a couple of the Storm Blades that were just covering Striker's charge lanes there. And he got his Stalker in, charged another one of the Storm Blades, and I believe it's one of the spells from Pirate's Queen Scar that allows the Stalker to jump following a charge, and so the Stalker was able to make enough space and then jump in, get into base-to-base contact with Striker, and take him down, even though he was camping a focus. And that was it, really. I mean, it would have been possible for my opponent to roll badly. I think he was looking to hit. I think he was looking for 9s on 3d6, boosting, obviously. And it just worked out. So we both agreed that if that hadn't worked out, then I definitely would have just been able to walk all over him in the following turn. But yeah, so that was that, really. It was quite interesting for me. I almost had Rowdy in base contact with Striker, but I just didn't consider that anyone would be getting into close combat with Striker on the next turn. So even though I had the chance to put Rowdy up next to Striker and give Striker that extra 2 defense, I just didn't consider that it would be worth it. And also, there was just 2 Stormblades standing in the way, which prevented Rowdy from going in, moving in, and attacking the Stalker with a counter charge as it landed before it did its leap. So if he'd actually killed as many Stormblades as he wanted to, then I probably would have been able to counter charge with Rowdy and prevent the whole thing from happening. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out that way. So yeah, another loss for me, unfortunately. So I don't feel like so I've been assassinated 3 times, but I don't feel like I made any sort of super huge mistakes. I think the only problem was that I just didn't understand what I was up against each time. So the first one was assassination through just numbers, and then getting to Nemo 3, who's easy to assassinate. I just think that just worked out the way it worked out. I could have done better positioning possibly to prevent that. And then the second one was just getting blown up by a behemoth, which I just didn't see coming. I think both times maybe I could have benefited from playing Nemo just a little bit further back, possibly just keeping him just out of range, just a little bit further away, just a little bit harder to assassinate. I always fail to do that, unfortunately, with squishy casters. I tend to get assassinated a lot. I really need to learn to keep them back. Nemo, especially when he's got an arc node, he really doesn't have any reason to be anything further forward than the edge of the kill box. And yeah, once with Striker 2, and I really felt like he was well protected. He was in the zone, ready to score points if he could, and he was protected. He had models in the way. He's got high defense. He's got high armor. He's got lots of boxes. He was camping a focus, and yeah, even all of that stuff didn't stop the assassination happening. So yeah, so moving on to the final game, and it was the final game of the day. It was pretty late. I'd been doing quite a lot of waiting around because all of my games were over for pretty quickly, so I had a lot of downtime between games. So I was pretty eager to get this last game over with. Unfortunately, it turned out to be the longest game of the day. So yeah, pretty tired at this point, and I finally got my matchup against Cygnar. It was the only other player who had lost all of their games on the day. And it was a guy who'd been playing for about 6 months. Really nice guy, and a lot of fun to play against, actually. We had a lot of fun with this game, although it was quite frustrating in the end. So he had a Striker 1 list and a Sloan Hunter Spam list. I drew Striker 2, obviously, because that was the only list that I felt like had a pretty solid game up against Cygnar. And I'd never played against Sloan before, although I kind of knew what she did. And obviously, the huge benefit here is up against in the mirror matches is knowing what all of the opponent's models can actually get done. So he was in heavy metal, and with Sloan he had the Squire, and he also had the Stormwall and Lightning Pods. He had 5 Hunters, and then in addition to that he's got Runewood and Strange Ways and a Journeyman Warcaster with a Charger on it, and that's all in a heavy metal theme. And I think that's quite a common setup for Sloan, I believe. And I won the first turn, which I think was quite important because basically, because I've got Storm Lancers up here, and his Hunters would be able to take out a Storm Lance per turn, approximately. So what the opening part of the game is really all about is, can I get my guys, my melee guys, to him before he shoots them all off the table. So what you can see here is my first turn. You don't see the setup, but you can probably work out it was pretty much exactly the same as the last game. Stormblades in the middle with Striker and Rowdy and the Lancer, and then Storm Lancers on either flank. And yeah, so I think my opponent chose the side that he was on, which left me free to have this side, which had a crater on the right, and a building in the middle, and a forest, and the hill on the left. So I was able to get quite a lot of my Lancers, Storm Lancers, into some pretty decent defence all up on the hill, and in that crater on the right, and I obviously got deceleration up on Striker, and so that gave my army pretty good protection against his hunters shooting. All the hunters on his side are all advanced deployed, and Storm Wall right in the middle. It's a very low model count list, which is pretty good for a beginner because it helps with the death clock. So yeah, so he took his turn and he feated immediately, which I think we both agreed that was the right thing to do, because he really needed to take down those Storm Lancers before they got to his hunters. So yeah, he feated, and he started rolling. I think it's the worst rolling that I've ever seen in a game. We saw at least one treble one come up on the dice to hit. So he had guided fire up, so all of his to hit rolls were boosted. So he should have been hitting on all of those, and each hunter gets 2 shots because it's his feat turn. And yeah, what he managed to take down was 4 of the Storm Lancers on the left, and only 2 of the Storm Lancers on the right. So it was pretty decent, but I feel like it still left me more than enough to deal with his army on the table. So really all I've got to do is get the Storm Lancers up and engaged with his hunters. And because they lost parry, once you get those hunters engaged, they're pretty much useless. They're not close combat oriented at all, and they've got very low armour, and I think their defence isn't that great either. And then there was still enough Stormblades and Rowdy and Striker and Lattimore and the Lancer with positive charge. There was still enough of all of that stuff on the table to probably take down his Storm Wall. And Sloane on her own, she's good, but she's probably not good enough to deal with all of that on her own. So yeah, so that's what I did. Is my turn, I moved my Stormblades up. I think maybe this was a little bit of a mistake. Got the Stormblades up to behind the forest. So the Storm Wall couldn't draw line of sight to any of them on his next turn. My Storm Lance on the left charged the middle hunter, and he did some amazing damage. I think he almost took one of the hunters out. Even the Electro Leaps I was rolling crazy good dice on, I was just doing the opposite of his dice rolling. So I did way more damage to all those hunters than I was supposed to. I only got 1 charge off on the right just because of the way the distances worked out, but again did a huge amount of damage to his hunter, and then I had enough Storm Lancers to get up and engage the other light Warjacks, which kind of stopped them from being able to do anything. And I also managed to get Striker up into base contact with my objective, ready to start scoring on his turn. Not objective, onto my flag. So I needed to dominate that in order to score. And it also combined with Striker being up on the hill. So yeah, I was basically ready to score some points whenever that was possible. And so yeah, what my opponent had to do was basically deal with everything without having access to the hunter. So he had to do something with his Storm Wall and Sloane before I could get across the board to get to him and assassinate Sloane. So here's the next slide, and as you can see on the left, yeah, he managed to take down that Storm Lance and free up those 2 hunters, but not before he wasn't able to do any shooting with the hunters on that turn, I believe. On the right, there's also 2 of the Storm Lancers have been taken down. The Charger managed to take one down, and yeah, I think Runewood ganged up on the other one with one of the hunters. So yeah, so it's looking pretty positive for me at this point. I believe he just managed to move Sloane in to stop killboxing himself. And yeah, so all I need to do really is to close out the game at this point. the storm wall it's not really, it can't really do enough on its own to stop me, even by putting down those templates to prevent charge angles and things like that. So yeah, so my idea here really is to use Striker to take out Sloane, and this is the point where my entire game fell apart at this point. So yeah, I made a huge mistake on my turn. So what I did was I tried to flank using Striker to get round to get at Sloane on the following turn, but I took Striker off of my objective, off of my flag to do that, and he was really sitting pretty up there. He would have been able to just sit there and deal with anything that could have been thrown at him, and just sat there scoring points. And the clock was ticking down, so that would have been by far the better option for me. But for some reason I didn't even consider scoring on Cygnar at that point. It just went out of my mind completely, probably because I was so tired. So I did try and feat on this turn, and that was lame as well. So all I did was run up the storm blades up to the base of the storm wall, just to prevent him from doing any shooting, and then use my feet to just move up a little bit more and take some swipes. But power 15s, it just didn't work out. I rolled just below average, I think, more or less the whole way through. Didn't spike at all, and didn't take out the storm wall. It would have been quite nice. Rowdy, I forgot to allocate any focus on that turn, so I've got a huge stack of focus on Striker, because I was worried about him getting assassinated on his way in to kill Sloane. But in that I forgot to put any on Rowdy, so when he charged the storm wall he was only able to do one extra attack. The Lancer was out of Striker's control range because I moved over there, so he wasn't able to get any more focus for the rest of the game. So rather than just closing the game out and maybe just camping on that flag and then just clocking over and winning the game easily on points, I just ended up going on a merry chase with Sloane, and just a very inelegant end to the game. So all he had to do was basically stop me from scoring, and then contest his flag and let me clock myself, because I actually had less time on the clock than he did. So I was in a big panic to try and take out Sloane, and he kept on moving Sloane. As you can see here, he's moving her right, looking at moving her right as far as possible, just not quite going out into the kill box. I made another mistake. I kill boxed myself, because Striker was so far over on the left hand side. He was just firing down storm pods to contest my flag or his flag, just to prevent me doing any scoring there. So I was just completely fell apart at this point, and ended up clocking myself. Managed to take down the storm wall, but it was too late. I ended up with 8 seconds left on the clock, and there's not enough time to do anything with that, unfortunately. So that was the end of that. That was the end of the tournament as well. I've been going on for rather a long time now, for about 45 minutes. So I'm going to sign off. But yeah, so it was generally a pretty disappointing 4 games. Yeah, what can I say? Like I said, I think the first 3 games it was just my lack of experience that really spoke to what happened, just getting assassinated against stuff that I didn't really understand quite how it worked. But in that last game there's no excuse really. My opponent said that even though he won, he didn't really feel like it was a victory, because it was just such a mess at the end. And yeah, I think even if I had won I wouldn't have felt good about it, because yeah, it's just so clumsy and inelegant, and I should have been able to close out the game much quicker than that. So yeah, unfortunately a bit of a disappointing end to a disappointing tournament. But so I was feeling a bit dejected by the end of it, but everyone was really nice, and it was a very well organised tournament, great atmosphere. And by the next morning I was obviously feeling much better and feeling much more positive about things. And yeah, I'm looking forward to trying to get back to getting in a game every week. I'll try to be hopefully playing a new opponent this week. The next week I'll be very busy, but after that we'll try and get back into a regular rhythm of getting some back reps up on the channel. So I'm now going to be looking at trying out Nemo 3 with a Hurricane. I'll be proxying in a Stormwall for that initially, but I think Hurricane looks pretty promising with Nemo 3, so hopefully that's what I'll be getting a chance to try out on the next bat rep. So I'll see you then. Cheers.